people want chairs, can they have chairs for those who want?
Yes.
Who wants chairs? You don't have to sit on your cushion. We're not Asian. Well, you might be, but I'm not. If you want chairs, get a chair. Don't feel you have to sit on your cushion. Okay. Maybe later, yeah. Because it's not comfortable sitting on the floor. You need a chair. Be comfortable. It's important to be comfortable. So, do you only have 2 chairs? Because I bet you more people want chairs, Siki.
We'll find for them a
Good.
solution.
Okay.
Yes. No one will be left without his desire to feel.
Good.
So I turn this one off.
That's fine.
And
Yeah.
you tell me about the other one.
Okay. That's good. That's good.
I'll just shortly introduce Venerable Robina Courtin, which we are very happy and honored to host again here for the 2nd time. Her previous visit here was very substantial for many of us, and I'm very happy that she accepted our request and came back again for these 4 days teaching. I suppose you all got the schedule. If not, you can check later on with Anat on the back and get the printed schedule. We will start every day at 9:30 until towards 1. And then we will have lunch. And at 4 until around 7, we will have the afternoon session.
Okay.
Welcome everyone. I'm very happy that you chose to participate. It's actually the event that is opening our season. And again, we couldn't be more happy and honored to open it with Venerable Robina.
Thank you very much, Siki. Thank you for having me. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to sing a little prayer to start. And but kind of I like to say, don't get too holy just because I say a prayer, you know. Don't think of it like that. A prayer is just words, and words are thoughts, and Buddha's expertise is the mind. This is for sure. We're going to unpack that idea here, the absolute centrality of mind, and what the mind is indeed, from the Buddhist perspective, and what the potential of our mind is, from the Buddhist perspective. This is what we're going to talk about. So, this little prayer, it's got 2 parts, there's 4 lines. I'll sing it in Tibetan. But the first 2 lines are expressing that for any of us in this room who figure they're Buddhist already, identify with being a Buddhist. So it's kind of reiterating your reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And the second 2 lines can be for all of us. It's expressing an altruistic kind of purpose or goal or reason or motivation for our being here together, you know. To all of us together, listen to these ideas, this Buddhist worldview, basically, his view of the universe, his view of happiness and suffering and what humanity is and so on and so forth. And the reason is to get some tools from it. It's got to be practical, you know. To take some tools that you use in your life to help you develop your amazing potential, according to the Buddha, so that in turn we can develop these 2 wings of the bird, you know, wisdom and compassion, then be of benefit to others. We live in this world together. Thinking something like that. Sangye charan soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye dropa sho Sangye charan soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye dropa shok Sangye charan soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye dropa shok. Okay. So this 2 wings of a bird idea, you know, it's I really like this analogy. I use it a lot, and it's very much a way of also presenting the Buddhist approach to life, but also presenting it in a kind of a structured way. Because the wisdom wing, as the Dalai Lama says, compassion, which is the point, but it's not enough. We need wisdom. So compassion in general, we're going to unpack all these ideas from the Buddhist perspective, but compassion in general, we can hear it, is empathy with others, the suffering of others. But the really powerful level of compassion, of course, is the actions part. What can I do to help? What can I do to help? Martin Luther King said that. It's good to see problems in the world. He said it's good to be angry, meaning it's good to see there is suffering. But then, instead of just ranting and raving about it, you say, what can I do to help? That's compassion, and that's action. But if you can't put yourself together, if you're completely put up in your own misery and your own depression and your own anxiety and your own fears and worries, you can't even help but flee, So you've got to have, and that's what the wisdom wing refers to, which we'll talk about this first couple of days. How to know yourself. And in Buddhist way of talking, how to understand what your suffering is and the causes of your suffering, so that you can fundamentally reconfigure your mind, change yourself. This is what Buddha's saying. So first of all, before we even talk about what Buddha says, it's important to remember just briefly who the Buddha was, because that informs the way we listen to this. I mean, if we think of religion in the world, or even just the word spiritual, we tend not to use our common sense. We tend not to think, we would, if I were discussing Einstein's theories in this room, we'd all have our intelligent hat on. But as soon as it's spiritual, we kind of get a bit kind of weird, I think. We sort of think you can't prove anything, and it's all a bit mystical, and there's this spirit and this soul, and then there's, this, and we tend to have this vague idea about what's called religion or even spiritual. But this is, interestingly, it's not the Buddhist approach at all. And we understand that clearly when we understand kind of historically what Buddha was. Well, okay, now I was brought up a Catholic, okay? That's classic religion, isn't it? And mostly when we think of religion, it's almost by default, it's a creator idea. And therefore you have faith in it. Why? Because God is the superior being who created the universe, created me, created the laws of morality, and therefore, of course, is to be obeyed. I mean, I remember asking a Jesuit priest, friend of mine, I said, what is a sin by definition in general for Christians? And he said, there is the natural law that, things do harm others, but the real point of a sin, what determines it, is that you do what God said not to do. So if you analyse what we think of morality and ethics, we kind of vaguely think it's about that. It's either what God said or what Mummy said, When I'm on my mummy's household and she says, do that, I will say why, and we know what she'll say, because I say so. And we know that if you're a good girl, you do what Mummy says, and if you're a bad girl, you do what she didn't say. So that's our view of morality, I think. And as soon as we hear anything about morality, like do this, we get kind of all a bit kind of rebellious. Whereas if a doctor advises us, don't smoke, you might get cancer, we don't get rebellious, we're really grateful. We get given decent advice. But we don't think of it like that in morality, and I really think it's really good to unpack it. So we'll go into this. This is the Buddhist approach, So because Buddha is he doesn't assert a creator, and I will go into this, and in fact it's sort of really he's saying that a creator is an unnecessary embellishment. He even uses the term superior being. I mean, if you heard the definition of what a Buddha is, which is what he would say is the potential of every one of us, and we're discussing our mind here, not some mysterious part of us, then it almost sounds like what you mean by God, So Buddha's asserting immense potential in every one of us. But he doesn't assert the idea of an external being who runs the universe or creates us. This is where the law of karma comes in. We'll go into this. This is the Buddha's view. This, as far as he's concerned, is a natural law that runs the universe. It doesn't need anybody pulling the strings, So that means in Buddhist view also there's no concept of punishment and reward. But the Buddha would use a term like a negative action and a positive action. But it's not an action that he says you should or shouldn't do. He would say it's a natural law if you analyse it. So Buddha was a regular guy, basically, who came out of this Hindu tradition. And it was just recently, I remember hearing the Dalai Lama say that, it was the Hindus, maybe 3,000 years ago, who were the ones who really began this actually astonishing investigation of the nature of self. I mean, to the world in general now, maybe to even most practicing Hindus, this is not visible. If you look at, what you think of a Hindu, you just see lots of statues of naked ladies and gentlemen, I mean, I'm being cliched here. We know yoga is an astonishing system, but I mean, it's filtered down. It's very the understanding of the philosophy and of the great Hindu thinkers is pretty much not studied by most people. And much of the stuff that's Buddha, because Buddha came out of that, and he went and diverged in his own direction. But even all these techniques that we call meditation now, this especially in particular the one that's broadly known as mindfulness, it comes from this astonishing psychological technique that the Hindus created. These amazing masters and yogis way back then. in their investigation of exactly what is a person, what is a self, who are we at our very core. And of course this is the topic of scientists, this is the topic of all your psychologists, this is the topic of religions. So the Hindus, 3,000 years ago, amazing. Their findings were remarkable, and much of the stuff that Buddha brought is from that background. So he came out of that background historically, like left his home, which was the common thing and still is, and joined the homeless and became a great sadhu, a great yogi and meditator, using these techniques to plumb the depths of his own being, not in some vague, mysterious, hippie way, but in a really focused, clear, powerful, disciplined way. This is not how we think of meditation, but this is definitely so, and we'll talk about it. So Buddha came out of this. So basically, Buddha, he diverged from the Hindu views, which are quite subtle when we go into them, about particularly in relation to the nature of self, which is the stuff that underpins the Buddhist philosophical approach to the universe. We'll go into this, we'll see. It's all very relevant. But basically the key point I'm saying here is this. When I think of Christianity, I think of Jesus, and Jesus, as we know, according to Christianity, was God manifesting as a human being, Generally the teachings are from God. Because he's the creator, it will be considered extremely rude to start questioning God and sticking your nose into his business and trying to work out what his things is. And as for finding out whether he's right or wrong, that would be considered not appropriate. And that's totally fine if you have the view of a creator. In fact, my feeling is if you really do have faith in a creator, that does assume you should have complete 100% faith. Surrender to God. Best. You can't argue, I mean, that's really intense. But that's not the Buddha's view. Buddha was a regular guy who from his own hard work, using all these marvelous techniques, came to certain, not just kind of conclusions, but direct experiential observations in the subtle depths of his own mind, which is what these marvelous meditation techniques enable a person to do, and they're intact right until now, about the nature of beings, the nature of self, and crucially about what is happiness, what is suffering, and what our potential is. So essentially, putting it simply, what Buddha came up with from his own direct experiential findings, is not revelation, is that every single being, every one of us, and the term in Tibetan is very nice, it's the word sem chen, mind possessor. And the word in Buddhism for mind, the word mind doesn't mean your brain. We're going to go into this. It's also used synonymously with the word consciousness. That every mind possessor, and for the Buddha that does not just mean humans, all the billions of creatures, all the billions of beings that are not embodied, that we can't see, Buddha would assert a whole spectrum of types of sentient beings or mind possessors. Every one of us, by definition for the Buddha, has this natural, phenomenal potential, essentially to perfect the goodness and get rid of the badness. I mean, it's the simplest way of putting it. And don't hear that in a moralistic sense, So then, one of the packages of Buddha's teachings is called the Four Noble Truths, which is the first teaching he gave after 6 years of intensive, investigation and meditation in his Hindu tradition, and then came up with these various findings. This is where he diverged in his own findings about the nature of self, which is what Buddhism is, So basically, if the Buddha is saying every sentient being, every mind possessor possesses this marvellous potential, and that potential exists in your mind, we better know what he means by mind. And this is a really crucial point. You're going to hear lots of words here. You read lots of words in Buddhist books that we're very familiar with. You're going to read about the mind. You'll see the word mind. You'll hear the word attachment. You'll hear the word love, compassion. Hardly rocket science. But every one of us would have our own definitions. And it's really crucial to be clear what Buddha means by them. If we're talking Buddhism, we better know what he means by them. Don't just assume your own definition. And we can see one word can have many definitions. This is kind of a major point. We don't think that in spiritual terms. We need to. If you live in the UK, you live in a flat. If you study music, you'll play a thing in what's called B flat. And if you study geometry, you'll know you've got a flat surface. Same word, completely different meanings. Like another language, according to the system. Same here. It's really important. So the word mind, I tell you, is so different from how we think. You practically could use another word, in many ways, and you'll see. So this is the Buddhist view. So, okay, the way to listen to Buddhism, because he's not a creator, because it's not revelation, he didn't have a vision about it, he's not speculating, he's very confident to tell you that he's right, and he's allowed to say that, which is kind of interesting, because as soon as we say that in religion, we think you're being fundamentalist. But again, if I were Einstein here, telling you about relativity and my findings about it, and I sort of wishy-washy, well, I'm not sure if I'm right here, you'd throw me out the door. You'd like me to know I'm right, please. Otherwise, keep your mouth shut, mislead you. But you know very well I'm not asking you to believe me. You know I didn't have a dream about it. You know it wasn't revealed to me by some superior being. You chucked me out the door for this reason as well. You know I came to these conclusions myself. That's the Buddha's approach. Shockingly to us, because as soon as we hear, Buddha's view about reincarnation, because we assume it can't be proved, we just assume it. There's not a single logical reason, not from the Buddhist point of view. Of course you can prove it. If he has seen this to be true from his own direct experience, and he was a regular guy, it follows logically, I can too, by following his steps. And as the Dalai Lama says, he's either right or wrong. So if you follow the steps of the Buddha and you get to one where you really did follow the steps, but you don't have the experience, validly follow the steps, not just pretend, then Buddha's wrong. You must reject him, This is surprising to us because we don't think like this in spiritual terms, Okay, so what's the mind? Because this is the central player in the universe for the Buddha. It's not a cliche for the Buddhists to say that literally all happiness and suffering comes from the mind. That makes no sense to us with our view of the mind, So our view of the mind, what is it? It's the brain. It's physical by definition. It came from mummy and daddy. That's for sure. Unless you're, if you're a Christian or a Jew, I'm not sure about Jews. Every time I ask Jews what they believe, they never quite know. I've never yet heard tell me about heaven or anything. Every Jew, the serious ones in Israel, everywhere, I never get a proper answer. Maybe Tsiki can tell me, I don't know. But anyway, Christian I know a bit about. Anyway, now I forget what I said. Lost the plot there.
But what is mine?
What?
What is
Yeah. Huh?
But what is mine?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, good. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll continue. Okay. So first of all, the word mind, like I mentioned, is used synonymously with the word consciousness, which already gives it a kind of a nice flavour, And it's used in a much more subjective way, meaning each moment is your mind, each moment of what you think, feel, all your feelings, all your emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, all this is known as your mind, your consciousness, your mental experiences. First point. Second, it is not your brain. This is the biggest shock for us because we use these words synonymously since we're born, So it's really hard to hear this and to take it as your working hypothesis. This is the crucial point I want to make. If Buddha is not a creator, if he doesn't assert a creator, if this is not revelation, it is not to be believed, therefore, like any decent scientist, you'd open your mind if you want to listen to it and you take it as a hypothesis. Why not? You have to do that to start, If this were acupuncture, 50 years ago in Melbourne when I was brought up, 60 years ago when I was a kid, I'd never heard of acupuncture. I'd know allopathics, that's about it. Then someone comes along, let's say, and tells me they've got these weird doctors who stick needles in you. Well, the first impulse is, don't be ridiculous, isn't it? Because it doesn't fit your model. So then the next thing to do if you're going to have an open mind is to open your mind to the possibility that it could be right, not just be fundamentalist and say it's ridiculous. So the first step is, let's say, the Buddhist view, listening, because it's not fitting with other views, let's say, it's different. The first one is, well, let's see if there's something there, Open the mind to it. But not believe it. This is the thing. Don't have to shove it down your throat and sort of just undigested, kind of stick it in your body. It's absurd, Listen to it. Have a relaxed mind to listen to it. And you might walk out this door completely bored and not want one single thing. That's totally your right. You are the boss, not Buddha. So take it as a hypothesis, is the idea. And that's what I say for myself. I never use the words, I believe in Buddhism, I believe in reincarnation, I believe in karma. I never say those words. Because I think it can bring a lot of intellectual laziness, kind of sink into it. Yeah, kind of go around shopping, Oh, yeah, I like reincarnation. Oh, I don't like that, though. No, I'll take this and stick it in your little bag. No, that's just intellectual laziness. So I say it's my working hypothesis. And I mean that very sincerely. Because that makes it an ongoing thing, not something you believe in and leave there, Oh, yeah, I believe in mathematics. I'm very happy for you. How's it work? Oh, I don't know. Not much use. A bit useless. It's got to be dynamic. It's got to be living for you. Okay. Your mind it's including all your inner experiences to the most subtle, unconscious, subconscious, whatever. Second, it is not your brain. Not one atom of your mind for the Buddha is physical. Very simple. Fundamental for the Buddha. Not difficult to think, but just because it's not fitting with our view, it'll be initially quite a contradiction. But it doesn't have to be. The last 30 plus years have been amazing conferences run by this American organisation called Mind and Life. You'll see their website, mindandlife.org. They've been running meetings, organising meetings between the Dalai Lama, some of the best Tibetan Buddhist brains, and the best, scientific brains. Amazing findings of coming out of these meetings, much of which have been published. It's really marvellous stuff that's going on, the meeting of minds. It's been incredible. Because, in the materialist, in the modern world, the Buddhism that's studied in the Tibetan monastic university system, which tracks itself back to the great monastic university system of India, which indeed tracks itself back to the great, philosophical tradition of Hinduism, is really completely hidden in the modern world. It's completely hidden. Nobody has a clue about it. So it's not that you need to, but it's marvellous that with the Dalai Lama and these people having these meetings and finding so much common ground. It's really incredible. Really marvellous. So in fact, even many of the findings about neuroplasticity the last few years coming directly from these meetings and the findings from, the brains of meditators. That you're not stuck with the brain you're born with. As one scientist said, the greatest finding of the 20th century. Well, I'm very happy we're now catching up with Buddha. He's been telling us for 2,500 years that we can change our mind. Of course, he didn't mean the brain, but he means the mind. Your thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious. It's got infinite potential. As my teacher Lama Zopa says, we can mould our mind into any shape we like. So it ain't your brain. Doesn't mean the brain doesn't play a role. That's clear. It's just a different way of talking. One has to think this through. The other thing that's radically different about the mind is the levels to which it goes, Or in other words, a level to which it has the capability of cognition. Its function is to cognize. And this is a major point for the Buddha. The question would be, of course, well, cognize what, Robina? Well, Buddha says to cognize that which exists. Existence, reality, truth. These are very potent words, So Buddha's deal, long term, is that every mind has this potential to see reality, to see the truth. And why that has meaning for the Buddha is because he says the extent to which we're caught up in nonsense, which he says we are now, and we'll go into this, is the extent to which we suffer. So one way of framing all of Buddha's teachings is, if you did a bit of survey in this room, do you like suffering? We'd all know the answer. Do you want happiness? Yep. But if I asked you, do you want wisdom? Well, a bit vague about that one, Sure, maybe. Not sure. But for the Buddha, these two go perfectly together. It's doesn't seem evident to us, but the Buddhist approach, you'll see, it's very fascinating. The extent to which we're caught up in rubbish in our minds, Buddha says, we'll go into this, is the extent to which we suffer, and therefore cause suffering to others. So the method for getting happy, which is one way of saying what he says we can do, to perfection, is to rid the mind of the rubbish, and this is what we're going to discuss. So your mind, in order to do this, we've got to plumb the depths of our mind to go to far more subtle levels of cognition that we don't even posit as existing in our culture, which the Hindus first came up with in their marvellous techniques. So mind has got this capacity, in other words, consciousness has the capacity at subtler levels to cognize phenomena that the gross consciousness can't. So the way we talk about the mind in our culture is like from the time you wake up till the time you go to sleep. That's what we're dealing with. Dreams are kind of weird and wonderful and strange, and there's no real common ground about that. But for the Buddha, it's just the tip of the gross consciousness, sensory and mental, the conceptual level, is just the gross tip of the iceberg of this mind of ours. So that, these meditation techniques, the kind of a typical, one of the words for this type of meditation that's known these days as mindfulness, but it's coming directly from this very, astonishing, disciplined, psychological skill from the Hindus through the Buddha that's still relevant, and many people right now up in the way off there 2-3 years practicing this to accomplish this goal, what they call single-pointed concentration at a subtle level of mind. So if you were to see a person who has accomplished this level of cognition, level of mind, which is necessary to accomplish, to do the job that Buddha says we have to do in the long term, they would look like they were dead, No gross physical, no gross brain, nervous system activity at all. So, of course, we don't even posit that level of consciousness as existing in our culture. It just sounds like, weird and wonderful. So the level to which the mind goes, a subtle and more refined level, way more than we would even think is possible. The other thing about the mind, which is quite shocking to us, It's not given to you by someone else. You know, the default, and I'll put it purposely in this, belief system is that your mummy and daddy made you. You'd never think that as a belief system. Scientists would never say they've got a belief system. They say they say they see truth. Well, Buddha would suggest it's not truth. His findings are different. And he would suggest, like anything else, it's a belief system. A bit shocking. Materialists often say, oh, I don't believe in anything. As if somehow what they do believe in is just truth. You know, that's an interesting point, which we'll talk about. But Buddha would suggest your mummy and daddy don't make you. They give you a brain, no props. They give you a body, how kind. But they do not give you your anger, your love, your kindness, your jealousy, your forgiveness, your psychosis. You'll be good at football or music. They are yours. And they don't come from a creator. So if you're a Christian, God made you. If you're a materialist, mummy made you. For the Buddha, nobody. You don't need to be made by somebody else. This is Buddha's view. So the obvious question is, oh, where do I come from? Pretty obvious next question. Well, simply from previous moments of yourself. It's the simplest way of putting it, you know. So if you think of your consciousness, not your body, but your moments of consciousness, your moments of thoughts and feelings and emotions, like a river of mental moments. You know very well, even though you don't remember 90% of today, forget about yesterday, forget about a past life, what a joke. But you know very well, even though you don't remember, you know your consciousness has been happening every millisecond. This moment of consciousness coming back to the previous, going back to the previous. And if you had perfect memory, you'd have this unbroken chain of mental moments, wouldn't you? Going right back to when? Well, keep going back. Little boy, little girl, 1 month, a week, a day, pop out your mummy's womb. And you've got to keep going to the previous moment. Because nothing comes from nothing. You can track your body back, right back to the egg and sperm of mummy and daddy. And you can track their eggs and sperms to their previous mummies and back to beginningless mummies and daddies. This we know. It's logical. So consciousness for the Buddha, not physical, you can track it back to. This moment of consciousness necessarily comes from the previous. You get back to the first second of conception, the second before conception, egg was in mummy's body, sperm in daddy's body. Your consciousness, a previous moment of itself. Subtle level of consciousness for the Buddha doesn't need the gross body to exist. This is why all these experiences people have of out-of-body experiences, near death, they fit completely into the Buddha's view. They're able to be explained exactly according to the Buddhist view. It fits, those experiences. So consciousness itself is not physical. At the gross level, indeed, it functions through the medium of a body, but necessarily one can go to subtle levels of it. And so the moment before conception, the mind indeed was more subtle, and Buddha would suggest not more than a few weeks before that you were in a previous body, and so on. This is Buddha's observation, and all the Buddha's teachings, and all the Buddha's views about happiness and suffering, and the big picture in Buddhism, the Buddhist worldview. This is a crucial, central part of it. So, of course, a person who, lots of people in the world use Buddhist techniques, let's say. Catholic priests, friends who use Buddhist techniques. Clearly their philosophy is the Christian one, but they can take a tool from here and there. That's valid for Buddhism. You can be a 1% Buddhist, no problems. I just know from my mind, always in my life, first part of a Catholic and all these other things, and then always wanting a worldview. I didn't quite know those words then, but I wanted to kind of like, what are the scientists saying? What do they call it? They're looking for a theory of everything, isn't it? Is that what they say? Mm-hmm. What's the word?
Theory of everything.
That's what they say. Okay. I've always wanted a theory of everything. I just never went in the scientific direction, that's all. It's interesting. For me, at the moment, I'm working with the Buddhist, my hypothesis, the Buddhist view of the universe, what it is, where it comes from, what happiness is, what suffering is, what sentient beings are, what the self is. This is all covered, like I said, in the Tibetan monastic university system. They study this stuff for 30, 40 years, then go meditate on it for another 30 or 40 to get the penny to drop. So this is the model I'm working with. In my life, that's my choice. Okay. So, your mind is not physical, doesn't come from mummy daddy, comes from previous moments of itself, is a name given, was used synonymously with the word consciousness. It refers to the entire contents of your inner being, to the subtlest level, consciousness, mind. And the next point, it has this marvellous potential, literally you could say, for perfection, My Catholic mum was shocked by that. But it's interesting, the word Buddha, Sanskrit, the Tibetan word for Buddha, the term Sangye. Sang implies the complete eradication from our mind of all the neurotic states of mind. And this is what we're going to get into, the contents of the mind according to the Buddhist model. The first syllable, sang, like I said, implies the complete eradication to the subtlest degree of all neuroses from the mind, which are the causes of suffering, Buddha would say. And the second syllable, ge, implies the complete development to perfection of all the virtue, the goodness, the wisdom, the clarity, these things, joy, compassion, love, blah, blah. And this seemingly sort of almost simplistic idea, this is fundamental to understanding the way the mind works, the Buddhist model of the mind, which we'll now talk about. So your mind's not physical, doesn't come from mummy daddy, goes to really subtle levels, has this infinite potential for perfection. And isn't your brain, it's about it really. So it's kind of a different way of seeing your mind, definitely. Yes?
Where is the place of the free will?
Okay, we'll all go there, I promise.
Okay.
You're jumping about 47 steps ahead. I never even mentioned anything related to that yet. One step at a time. Thank you very much. It'll come, I promise. What's your name?
We met yesterday night.
Oh, we did? Where are you? I can't see you. I've got my glasses on. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was disturbed in his peace last night. I was bashing my furniture around at midnight.
Yes.
I know. Excuse me. Okay. Because I use my qua number. Anybody use their qua number, feng shui? I use my qua number. It goes the right direction for sleeping. So I had to put my furniture this way, then I put my computer over there, and I move the bed this way, and I... whatever. Okay. We'll all go. I forget your name though again. I forget your name.
Vasilis.
Asiv.
V-A. Vasilis.
Vasiv.
Vasilis.
Vasilis.
Yes.
Oh, okay, Vasilis. You're a Greek boy.
Yeah. This is the belief.
Okay. All right, so now let's look into the mind then. So essentially in the Four Noble Truths, Buddha's saying, the Four Noble Truths is nice, but as soon as you say the word noble again, so forget noble, okay? The four facts. Truth, fact, facts. I like that word better. Truth fact sounds very delicious. I like that. So the four facts. The context is suffering. The third one is where Buddha says, from his own findings, that we all possess this potential to be free of it and its causes. If you flip that over, it sounds very tasty, full of happiness. I like that, thank you. So if it's true, even broadly, if it's true, you think, if it's true, well, that's interesting, then I better know what he means by suffering, so I can get free of it, please. And I better know what the causes are, so I can stop doing them. It's pretty obvious. So the first one is there is suffering, he lays out exactly what it is. The second one is there are causes. And the fourth one is the methods. It's kind of practical, So, okay, and the third one he is saying, we've got this marvellous potential to be free of suffering and its causes. Well, the second one is with the causes. And we can, so just jumping to that one just here now, the Buddha would say that all the neuroses in our mind, I like that word, he would like that word, the neuroses in our mind, the fears, the dramas, the anger, the jealousy, the depression, the low self-esteem, the arrogance, all the crazy stuff. You look at the world, look at ourselves and the world, we recognize all these. His shocking finding from his own experience is this stuff is adventitious. That's the word they use. You need your dictionary for this. I don't use that word in my daily life. Adventitious. It means it doesn't belong. It's not at the core of our being. It's not necessary. This is beyond shocking. I mean, if one of you was a therapist and I come and I say, would you please be so kind as to give me methods to get rid of all ego, all fear, all jealousy, all depression, all low self-esteem, all attachment, all anger, and then cultivate infinite love and compassion for all beings continuously, I think you'd suggest I was mentally ill. Honestly, sincerely, would you not? Because the default belief in our mind, in our world, all the models of mind in our culture, I don't think you'll find one that even remotely goes anywhere near that. In fact, I would suggest that every single model of mind in our culture, including all the scientific findings, take as an absolute given that what Buddha refers to as ego and its voices, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, etc., are normal. In fact, you'd be considered abnormal if you didn't have them. A normal human being, is it not, is considered a person who's got kind of like a bit of love, a bit of kindness, a bit of anger, a bit of jealousy, but kind of hopefully a bit more of the good stuff. Hopefully, we understand that. But to be as radical as to suggest that you can utterly remove from your mind all ego and its voices sounds mentally ill. Because in fact, all our models of the mind assume that we're social beings who interact, who need these things to be healthy. So it's quite shocking what Buddha's saying on the face of it. Quite shocking. That's why we assume it's religious. Well, you can't prove it, you know. Go to heaven, you'll get it. Find nirvana, you know, something like that. Vague notions. This is a function, this is a potential of our consciousness, Buddha says. Our mind, each individual being possesses this potential. You've achieved your nirvana when you've gone to certain levels of this realization. This one, you've removed to a certain level. Buddhahood, they talk about it goes further, but generally you've achieved your cessation of suffering, your liberation from suffering, these words they use, you know. That's what nirvana means. It's not some place like heaven. It's literally your own mind. When you've accomplished you've removed from your mind. Completely removed. This is a shocking concept. We think of it simply, it's shocking, you know, because it's not our experience. Who's created our marvellous models of the mind? Human beings like you and me. So they naturally assume, you look at your own mind, you see it feels instinctive, it feels primordial, it feels totally true. We don't see any examples of people, we can't see examples of people who don't seem to have this. So it seems very bizarre to us. But this is what Buddha's saying. This is what he's saying. Okay, so if it's true, I have the potential to remove from my mind, using his model, his definition, these neuroses. Well, it's kind of hardly rocket science. I better know how they function. I better be able to recognise them. It's very clear, isn't it? Then I can do the job. You know? That's why we need these meditation techniques. We need to get to subtle levels in the long term. But we start where we are, which is like today. You know? So this means we better, again, look at what he refers to as these states of mind. And what is it about them that causes suffering? Because he would suggest that the main cause of all our suffering, all beings on this earth, which is a bit of a huge point to make. We better understand them in depth and know how they function, so we can recognise them, so we can then start to do the work of unpacking and unravelling and deconstructing them and changing them and eventually removing them from our mind. This is the idea. Okay, so the Buddhist model of the mind. Well, you know, there's very simple, almost embarrassingly simple. It seems simplistic, in fact. If we look at modern psychiatry every day, the volumes and volumes are growing. Every day, new, what we call mental illnesses are being identified, you know. Well, you know, the Buddha's view of mental illness, again, he would have loved that word. Great phrase, mental illness. They're called, for the Buddha, they haven't changed in 2,500 years, and they're called these neurotic emotions, which always sounds simplistic to us. You know, yeah, anger, oh yeah, I know about that. Jealousy, fear, yeah. But then you go to the doctor, they talk about you've got bipolar or ADHD. Now you sound like you're serious. You know, you've got a serious mental illness. Anger, that's not a mental illness. That's just normal. But ADHD or whatever they're called, that's a mental illness. Buddha's view of mental illness is the stuff that we have every day. They're mental illnesses. They break our hearts. You know, they're the source of our pain, and therefore why we harm others. You know. But of course, because we're used to hearing it as religion and moralistic, we get all guilty. Completely irrelevant. So this is all the wisdom wing. The wisdom wing is where you've got to put yourself together, get into your own mind, back off, leave beings alone, and start being your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe puts it. Really know yourself intimately and well. So you start to change yourself and become this marvellous person that we can become, you know. More wise, more stable, kind, disciplined, you know, fearless, confident, not lazy, not attached, not depressed, not jealous, more loving, more compassionate. This is what Buddha says, really down to earth. This is the potential that we call caution. Then, of course, compassion wing, help others on the basis of this. Okay, so your mind is not physical. It's used with words, synonymous used with the word consciousness. It goes to subtle, more refined levels than we could even ever posit as existing in any of our models of the mind. He doesn't use a word like soul or spirit, period. Doesn't use those words at all. But you could argue, if you want, speaking very loosely, the level of mind that our mind does go to, which we can in the long term access, in the highest kind of teachings, they refer to this as very subtle consciousness. It's a simple word. You could almost argue that's your kind of what other people refer to as soul, but he does not use that word. Doesn't use that one. Spirit or soul. It's like an unnecessary embellishment again. Don't need it. Mind's enough. Consciousness. Doesn't come from mummy daddy. Doesn't come from Buddha. It doesn't come from a creator. And doesn't come from nothing. It doesn't pop up out of nowhere. It's got its own evolution, its own continuity. That goes back and back and back and back and back and back. And when we die, it goes forward, 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 forward. For the Buddha, consciousness is beginningless and endless. Which is a bizarre idea. To think that your own mind is beginningless sounds almost hilarious, you know. First, we don't remember, as if that's any proof. Like I said, we don't remember most of today. It's not like proof of much, is it? But it just, the idea that your consciousness goes back even before this life seems almost weird to us. And then to think that it's beginningless is kind of beyond shocking. It's kind of the weirdest idea. But this is Buddha's view, his findings. Okay, so then we need to know how this mind works. If he's saying we can develop this mind to astonishing degrees, we better know what it is, know the techniques to identify what's there, and begin to do this job, if we so choose. So then we need to know the Buddhist model of the mind. Well, a very simple model, like I mentioned. So the contents of our mental consciousness. Okay, before we even go there, let me just explain. When you study Buddhist model of the mind, you learn the epistemological model of the mind, which is the way the mind functions, perception, conception, and it's really kind of fascinating how this functions, quite abstract even. It's very marvellous and very interesting. But here we're going to look at the psychological model, the way our mind works day by day, the contents of our mind, the contents of our thoughts and emotions, knowing these well. This is our job, being our own therapist. So according to the psychological model, or go back to the other one, we've got the two ways the mind functions, broadly. You've got sensory consciousness, and you've got mental consciousness. Well, mental consciousness, they point here. The Buddhists point here, you know. That's where the workshop is, if you like, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says. Sensory, which we think is so powerful, we make the body the boss, as Lama Yeshe puts it. But for the Buddha, your sensory consciousness actually is completely leading us up garden paths, has profoundly limited capacity for cognition. It's very limited. It's like really dumb. So let me explain. You'll see what I'm saying. So, you know, I might go, pick it up and I go, oh, what a pretty cup, if I had my glasses on. Right? I might go, there's a pretty cup. Now, it doesn't take long. You pick it up, you look at it, and within a millisecond, oh, what a pretty cup. This is how we live in our lives. It's quite quick, you know. So then the assumption is, my eyes are seeing a pretty cup. We assume that. Buddha says, don't be silly. Your eyes don't have that capacity. Your eye consciousness has the capacity to cognize precisely two things, shape and colour. So where is a pretty cup coming from? That's from your mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is. That's where all your billions of memories, and Buddha would say memories from countless past lives, but they're buried, but they're there to be accessed. Because the Buddhist view would be, I remember one Lama saying, it's almost like every millisecond of our day, everything we see and hear and experience through the other senses, everything we think about, it's like you're taking photos, billions a second, and you're programming them in your consciousness, not your brain, your consciousness. So they're all accessible. They're there, but we just have the capacity at the moment. So all this information is stored, is it not? I look. So, you know, cup, I know that label. You go into the millisecond, and this is really good, I like this analogy, quicker than Google, my mental consciousness is accessed. This amazing, incredible computer, not your brain, your thoughts, your consciousness. Information comes up, cup. I recognise blue, that shape, I recognise Chinese or whatever it is, you know. You've seen it before, it's all stored there. And then over the years develop one's own taste, what you think is pretty and not pretty. All of this is in the mental consciousness, and it is all a series of viewpoints. It's viewpoints, opinions, basically. So it comes from your thoughts. It's a very sobering idea. You know, I might look at, Vasilis, and I'm like, oh wow, he's so handsome. I can't believe this Vasilis. I met this, I met my soulmate. All this talk, how we talk, right? And to my eyes, we think he looks the most handsome guy in the universe. Your eyes are seeing shape and colour. The rest of it is a story made by your mind. It's really quite interesting to think this way. It's a story programmed in here. Okay, Buddha would even say we must have a karmic history from past lives. Forget all that one, we'll go into this. But then all the things that he is and that when he appears to me and my needs and my this and my that, it fits, you know. So then this story comes up. This story, and a series of opinions in my mental consciousness. And then, of course, we fight, and 6 months later, I can't stand the sight of him. Now, this ugly, mean, horrible Vasilis. I only know what he was like before. Well, he's always been what he is, but my idiot mind couldn't see it because, you know, I was seeing rubbish, which we'll talk about. So your eye consciousness is so limited. If I hear music and I hear that one note of that one trumpet, I go, wow, Miles Davis, you know. No, only sound, millisecond later, triggers my consciousness, all my memories are, my opinions, my tastes. Wow, Miles Davis, you know, blah, blah. So what Buddha is saying, this is what he means literally when he says everything's made up by the mind. And don't take it as a kind of a cheap cliche. It's got immense meaning in Buddhism. Immense meaning. Mental consciousness. All our billions of opinions. But the tragedy for the Buddha is that because we've been believing our stories for so long, we forget that they're stories that our mind has made, and we think they're the objective truth. This is why we have wars. You know, I'm right, you're wrong. And look at our minds, we're all like this. If I start to fight with Vasilis, you did that, I'll say. And he'll say, I didn't, Robina. I won't believe a word of it. You did. You are this. You did this. You said this. This is the way the neurotic states of mind function, which we'll go into now. But they're opinions in our mental consciousness. It's very sobering. No more. You've got to keep them. Do you mind? I'll open it up in a second. Okay, just briefly now, and then we can stop and have some questions. Briefly, I'll just summarise the way the model of the mind in Buddhism. That there's three categories. In our mental consciousness, there are precisely three categories of states of mind. In Buddhist psychology, they refer to them as mental factors, states of mind. And the labels are very interesting, you know, and these are not moralistic, these are technical. They're simply called negative or non-virtuous or neurotic or deluded or disturbing, various terms used. There's a category called positive or beneficial or virtuous or useful, productive. And there's a category that's neither of those, that's called neutral, not in the sense that they're not important, but they don't have this very potent characteristics of the negative and the positive, according to the Buddhist approach, which we'll go into. So the neutral ones, for example, got millions. I like to call these the mechanics of the mind, not your brain, keep remembering. There's many, many, many parts of our mind that have to function every millisecond for us to function as a regular person, whether you're a sniper or a meditator, whether you're a cook or a tennis player. You've got your negative ones, which would be the ones that ego was going to. The virtuous ones, so the ego ones, there's a hierarchy of them. It starts with this root, they call it, one of the key words in Buddhist psychology for these neuroses is the word delusion, which indicates a particular way they function. Like if somebody accused you of being delusional, you'd be very offended, basically. Because you know perfectly well they're accusing you of not being in touch with reality. And this is bullseye for the Buddha. He's saying exactly that. The extent to which we're caught up in these neuroses is the extent to which, like I said before, we're not in sync with how things exist. We're living in la-la land. These are making up stories, wrong stories, neurotic stories, mistaken stories, misconceptions. So the root delusion for the Buddha, we don't even give a name for this in our materialist views of the mind. It's known simply as ignorance, or in Tibetan, ma-rigpa, unawareness. But it's known colloquially, which is very tasty, as ego grasping. Ego grasping, this primordial assumption that runs the show of an unhappy, neurotic, bereft, lonely, separate, concrete, frozen in space self. Deep in our bones, this belief, a mistaken, one Buddha says, that is in the nature of fear. On the basis of this, its main voice is this craving, constant, every millisecond of attachment, neediness to get what that fantasy I wants every millisecond. And the millisecond it doesn't get what it wants, it gives rise to anger, aversion, panic attack, which internalizes as depression and despair, which gives rise to jealousy and all the other rubbish, you know. There's many, many of them, but we can look at half a dozen as enough to characterize most of our lives, from the neurotic point of view. There's like this hierarchy of them. We'll go into these. Then you've got the positive ones. We all know the words. Love, compassion, kindness, generosity, forgiveness, patience, these words. You know. They're the positive and negative. And again, they're not moralistic. They're technical terms for certain ways that mind works. The negative ones are naturally the source of suffering, my own and me causing harm to others. And the positive ones are naturally the source of my own happiness and my own capacity to help others. These are natural qualities, Buddha says, fundamental. These characteristics of them are natural, not imposed or created. Then the third category are all these different, like the mechanics of the mind, like I sort of my term, that we need in order to function. So for example, there's the ability, every millisecond there's one that's functioning, a type of ability that can they call it simply discrimination. They call it this. And it's an ability to see discriminate between bottle and blue and yellow and leaf and iPad and teapot every millisecond, every second. If that's gone, you've lost the plot, you know. There's one called mindfulness, which has practically got a capital M these days. Got its own religion practically. But actually what it refers to is one of these bare bones states of mind that everybody needs. As Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. That simply refers to then the capacity every millisecond to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. That's when when you lose that one, this is what, a symptom of Alzheimer's or senility. Well, like I just said before, I forgot what I was saying. This is the meaning of mindfulness. It's like memory being intact every second. We've got this other meaning as you say the word. It kind of implies morality, implies ethics, implies all these many other things. But this is this literal meaning. These are the ones that they call neutral, neither positive nor negative. But everybody needs them to function, whether you're a good person or a bad person. There's lots and lots and lots of these. And these are all described in depth in the Buddhist model of the mind. We're talking and not about the brain. Okay, so, all right, now ask me some questions about what I've discussed so far, if you'd like to ask questions. Vasily, what's your question? You had your hand up before.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I have a problem understanding and defining what is consciousness.
Okay, from the words I've said, which bit don't you understand? I'm not asking you to understand it or know it's true, just the word. So which bit don't you get?
The definition of the word. I mean,
which
how
one?
This abstract word of consciousness, which has a mechanism in the process of your evolution.
Okay, no, what you're trying to do is understand how it works. We're only discussing the definition, the words first. You can understand the word consciousness. You understand? I'm just telling you what Buddha is saying mind is your non-physical part of you that refers to these states of mind I just mentioned, and is not physical and is known as consciousness and mind. You understand those words. Well then, as you study it, like if you were to study it, then all these answers will come. You're rushing ahead of yourself. You're leaping about 1,000,000 steps ahead, Vasily. Really, can you sort of see my point? When you first learn mathematics, your teacher will tell you about 1 and 2 and 3 and she'll get you to memorize it. Well, get that down first. Don't start leaping into algebra yet. You're one step at a time. It will unfold. It'll all unfold. You leap ahead. Your question's already...
I mean, you have to know where you're going in order to know if you're ahead or not. So
no, you know where you're heading. You're heading to Buddhahood.
To what?
Buddhahood, perfection.
Okay.
Perfection. You're heading to perfection. This is the first step. So just let it sink in and hear the words and it will all unfold. All my explanations will be everything you're going to hear, and then it's up to you if you want to go further to investigate it and start making it your experience. No? Yep. You're demanding already the deep understanding of a highly realized being to be, first time. It's marvelous you should ask it, but one step at a time. See what I'm saying? Don't mean you shouldn't ask questions, but both questions, you leapt ahead.
The questions just pop up.
I know they do, but then maybe they're not relevant yet, so leave them there. Just because they pop up doesn't mean you have to ask them, because you've got a busy, intelligent mind. Join the club, dear, it's all right. Nothing wrong. It's good, nothing wrong. Don't be afraid to ask questions, please. Okay, go. What's your name? Say your name when you talk.
Amit.
Amit.
Amit with A. Yes.
Okay, Amit. What's your question?
What had happened to the what was happening to the ego 150 years ago before the ego was invented?
What, darling? What?
What was happening to the ego 150?
The ego?
Yes.
But did you not hear I
Before
said?
150 years ago, before it was invented.
Darling, did you not hear me tell you that all this information is coming from the Hindus of more than 3,000 years ago? Did you not hear that?
Yes, I did.
Well, then, what do you mean invented 150 years ago?
Well, the
Almighty
word
sake.
was not exist.
What?
Well, the word ego was not existing.
Excuse me, is it a Greek word, for God's sake, that
No, I mean
means
the
I?
meaning for it. The
Excuse
meaning
me,
that
I'm
we're
telling
giving-
you, you didn't hear me. You're so stuck in the materialist view, just because Mr. Jung or somebody. Come on, we're
guess
talking
you're
here from
right.
Hindus 3,000 years ago and Buddha 2,500 years
My
ago.
question is, can we say that the consciousness, I'm trying to translate it to myself. So can we say that the consciousness that you're speaking about is a verbal consciousness?
What, darling? Sorry, what?
Can we say that the consciousness that you're talking about
Yes.
is verbal consciousness?
What? Verbal? What do you mean
Yeah.
verbal? That's
Verbal,
called speech. That's not
word-made-
consciousness.
Word-made consciousness?
No, verbal is speech.
Yes.
From the Buddhist perspective, that's called speech.
Yes.
Consciousness is thoughts.
Hmm.
You see, all this is both of you are really helpful to understand. This is what happens when we learn a new model of something. We're so busy and full of our present views, we can't hear. You've got to empty your mind of all that stuff and try and listen freshly to this view. I mean, might be difficult. You intelligent boys, you know. Come on now, a girl's going to ask a question. See what's the difference. Just keep listening, Amit. Keep listening. I'm sure you are. Yes, go. Tell me your name, darling.
Melanie.
Melanie, go.
I'm not quite sure what the question is.
Okay, go.
There's fuzziness. The person, our being, you say doesn't come from Buddha says. doesn't-
Mummy or daddy? No.
But from my personal experience, maybe, I
Yes.
feel like there's an inherited, maybe, anger or.
No, exactly. No,
from my grandmother
exactly.
and-
I understand. That's our interpretation, isn't it?
But I feel this.
No, I do. No, but listen, wait. Would you accept that's our interpretation according to a certain model? The model that says that Mummy and Daddy made you. Would you accept that's a certain model? That's what we call the materialist model. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
Okay.
You can change it. I
Wait,
think
no,
you can
wait.
change it.
I'm just trying to answer your question. So the Buddha would say that's the wrong interpretation. He would suggest that your mummy has the same anger as you, but she's angry, and we're going to go into this, it's called karma, because she practiced it before, and you've got it because you practiced it before, and you came very nicely together. And so each other's feeds the other. So for example, my mother was a musician, and then she taught her little Bobsy, that's me, music. She said she had potential. So most of the natural one, taking the materialist view, the natural assumption is Robina got her music from her mummy. Natural. But the Buddha says, no, Mummy's good at music because she practiced it before and she brought it with her. And Robina was good at music because she had practiced it before and she brought it with her. And that goes for all of our tendencies, our anger, our psychosis. In other words, Hitler doesn't come from his mother. You can't blame his poor little Austrian housewife Mummy, you know. He brought his own stuff with him. Mozart brought his own stuff. This is a fundamental one. And of course it takes time to think this because we've got this other view, isn't it? You see my point? That's our interpretation. This is a different interpretation. This is the view of karma, which we'll go into. So, I'm not asking you to believe it, of course. I'm just talking about it. You understand, Melanie? Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
So, consciousness, go back and back and back and back.
Buddha would say that. Yeah.
Where does it start?
That's right. We all have that question. But for the Buddha, that's a silly question. It's okay, you're not silly, but we all have it. And he would give all these sorts of reasons saying why we want a first cause. But, you know, the simplest way to answer that, the Buddha would say, and I think we would agree, we live in a scientific world, everything exists according to the law of cause and effect. Would you agree in general, everything you point to, everything you use, everything you see, if you start to track it back, you'd track it back to the previous causes. You know, a cup came from clay, which came from this, which came from a mountain, and you'd keep tracking it back, wouldn't you? So we can see there's an evolutionary process of cause and effect. Would you agree with that? And we're very good at that in the Western world, so we can build 100-story buildings, and we can make amazing computers, because we know these laws of cause and effect. Botany is a law of cause and effect. All these laws that we know. Okay, you agree? Right. So then in general we would agree that whatever exists has to have a previous cause. And then that's the previous cause. Well, there's a consciousness as well. if you keep track, what's your name?
Right.
Spell it.
Oh, yeah.
Run. Okay. If we, think, okay, Run's consciousness comes from this moment of existing right now, and we track it back in an unbroken chain, and we get back to the first second of conception. Well, the Buddha would say, you go back to a previous second of that river of mental moments, and then you say, well, maybe I began the moment before. Maybe it began the moment before. But if that moment of consciousness existed, it has to have a previous cause. Nothing can come from nothing. So you go, well, maybe it started 1,000 years before that. Well, no, if it existed 1,000 years before that, that has to have a previous moment. Then you go back 1,000,000 years. I mean, intellectually, it sounds ridiculous, but it's the only thing you've got to do. So you will continue to find, if you use this idea of cause and effect as the basis of everything, you can't possibly ever find a first one which implies it didn't have a cause. That's meaningless, nonsense. So you have to deduce, if we take this model here as a hypothesis, that your consciousness is not physical, then it has to be beginningless. It can't have a first moment. It can't. This universe, the same. The Buddhist model of the universe, like in the medieval days, the Western model was based. We would say the world was made of the 4 elements. That's the Buddhist view. The universe is made of the 4 elements. And for the Buddhist view, they too are beginningless. This universe, as the Dalai Lama says, Big Bang, no problem, just not the first Big Bang, that's all. But physical matter is beginningless, and consciousnesses are beginningless. See, the physical world is looking for the first moments. I tried to work out where the universe began. The Christians would say God is the source, wouldn't they? The Jews maybe would say God is the source. Well, but if you're a clever child at school, you'll ask, well, who created God? Well, you're not supposed to ask that question, because God is said to be beginningless. Would you agree, if you have a view of God, God didn't have a cause, right? You agree? If you have that view. So when the Buddha says, no first cause is what I'm saying. But we all instinctively want a first moment. It's kind of fascinating. Meaningless question, Buddha says. It's coming from misconceptions in our mind. It's quite a subtle point. Are we communicating, Grant? Good. Thank you. Anybody else? Questions? Yes.
Robina, my name is Prem.
Prem, hello.
Hello. Listening to this beginninglessness
Yes.
of the Buddhist concept reminds me very much of something that I've been hearing lately in quantum physics.
Yeah.
This new concept of time being without beginning, without end.
Yes.
So
there you go.
Going into
Well, good. They're all looking into the same place as the Buddha. I'm very happy. We're all coming to the same conclusions.
Yes, it's beautiful.
It's interesting. And this is what I think is most fascinating. This is the point. This is the scientific view, but this is Buddha's view too. That Buddha didn't make up this stuff. He's not a creator. It's not made up by somebody. He says it does exist. It is how things are, and it's up to And he would suggest he's observing it to be so, which is a kind of interesting point. We can harness the energy of the universe, and we call it science, but we didn't make it. We didn't create it. We didn't really create mathematics. I mean, we came up with a way of using logic to characterize what already exists. That's very much the Buddhist approach too, which is that in that sense the scientific one. Yeah, very interesting.
So the
Yes,
question
right.
of mathematics.
Can't hear you, darling.
In the question of mathematics,
Yes.
then,
I mentioned that as one example.
Buddhism believe that mathematics.
Buddhism doesn't believe in anything.
Okay.
What's your question again?
What is the verb to use?
What?
The verb to use.
Oh, it doesn't matter. What's the question? Just
The
say
question
it.
is, that mathematics was invented by man or was discovered?
I would say discovered, because it's already existing. You're just using the energy of the universe and you give names to it, and then we can use it. As marvellous, isn't it? Using the laws of the universe. Mathematics is like the laws of the universe, isn't it? Wouldn't you say? So all I'm getting at is the big. What I'm getting at is the big difference between the creator idea of somebody inventing it all, and then the scientific one of observing it. That's the Buddhist approach. That's all I'm suggesting. Do you see what I'm saying? Any more questions here? I think it's time for a tea break.
Yes. I thought that if it's okay with you, we start 9:30, so we have a break at 11.
Sure, 11 is fine, yeah, we can do that.
For about
Half an hour, then have lunch.
Exactly.
Come back again. So,
Okay.
so far so good. Then I'll go into more detail now about the way the mind works. I'll go into the contents of our mind. the way these neuroses work and how they cause us suffering. Okay, see you in 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.